So welcome to our Sustainability Lunch and Learn May edition today on the theme of youth climate activism. We have two representatives from the Effective Climate Action Project today with us, which is a youth-led environmental organization in Portland, Oregon, with a mission to promote effective and systemic solutions to climate change. So we have the founder, Luna Abadia here, as well as the climate simulation leader, Claire Yu. And yeah, they'll be talking about their organization, their work to address climate solutions, and just youth climate activism in general, which is our theme for the Sustainability BRG this month. So yeah, without further ado, Claire and Luna, you want to take it away?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Nicola, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me all right. We're so excited to be here to present for all of you. We're going to be talking about our youth climate activism, our personal journeys, what we do as an organization, and then hopefully offer some suggestions for what we think you all as a workplace and as employees can do to support our voices and to help the climate. Before we get started, though, I want to recognize that we're here as youth and that you are all here as experts of sustainability. So we're obviously not going to teach you about climate change or anything like that, but we really want to offer our youth perspectives and offer some suggestions on what we see as youth and what we think would benefit us, especially in workplaces. So yeah, without further ado, we can get started. Claire, if you want to move to the next slide. We wanted to start with an introduction of how each of us came into this space as climate leaders, as youth, and why we're interested in climate change as an issue. So my name is Luna Abadia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Effective Climate Action Project, which we will speak lots more about. And I'm here speaking to you now, but the journey to get here was quite a long one. So if you can see on the top left-hand corner there, that's an image of me when I was around, oh gosh, 5, 6, 7, not quite sure. But as you can see, I always had a passion for nature, and I really always felt this connection with the world around me. And so I think that's where my climate activism is most strongly rooted. When I was little, I would spend hours in the forest behind my house. I dreamed of becoming an entomologist. I studied bugs and organisms under a microscope I had. I even pinned up butterflies. And so growing up in the Pacific Northwest really shaped my love for nature and shaped this part of me. But as I grew older, I began to realize that not everyone has access to the nature that we have in Portland. Even in Portland itself, it's mostly the west side that has all the nature. And so I became more aware of these inequalities and that not everyone is lucky enough to breathe clean air or have these resources. And so with that consciousness, yes, me too, I love entomology. Thank you. Thanks, Taylor. With that kind of understanding, I began my first steps towards climate activism. I think I most became aware of the issue of climate change when I was around 10, 11, or 12. We learned about it in school, but it was really my personal passion for that connection to nature and that knowledge of the inequality that brought me to actually start pursuing activism. So if you see in the middle photo here at the top row, that was my first environmental group that I joined. It was the Audubon Society Youth Activist Conservation Team here in Portland. And we successfully advocated for the Portland Clean Energy Fund. And that was successfully passed. And then we went lobbying door to door, we did phone calls. And so that was a great first experience for me to dive into this realm of youth climate activism. I would say, however, that my true motivation to take action on climate change began when I studied abroad in Japan. I was a youth Rotary Exchange ambassador, and so I spent a year in Ehime, Japan. It's a rural island off of the main island called Honshu. And when I was there, I spoke to the locals. I saw the impacts of climate change. Increased typhoons, no snow in the winter, difficulty growing crops, all of these things that really scared me, and that opened my eyes up to the fact that the issues and the impacts of climate change are global, and therefore our solutions need to be so as well. And so while I was in Japan, I advocated at a local level, encouraging others to bring reusable bags and to avoid plastic waste at the supermarkets. But I got to this point where I was thinking about the climate crisis every single day when I went to bed, when I woke up. It was just the one thing in my mind. And so I felt like I had to do more. So I entered a Japanese speech contest, and I actually ended up writing a speech in Japanese on climate change about the importance of taking action on climate. You can see me here in the bottom right-hand corner there, presenting my speech. I presented it a few times, and I ended up winning actually both the regional and prefectural levels of this speech contest and becoming a national finalist. That was really exciting because I was able to take my passion about climate change and climate action and spread it in another language to more people than I ever thought would be possible. And so through that experience, I realized that anyone, especially youth, we can make a difference with our words and with our passion, and that myself too, as youth, I could make a difference for the climate. I'll try to wrap this up and not talk too much about myself, but when I came home from Japan after spending a year abroad, I came home due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I found myself wishing that, just like I had in Japan, others would gain an awareness of our global interconnectedness and enact effective solutions to climate change. I realized how much, for years, companies have been telling us that it's up to us as individuals to pick up trash and to recycle and all these things that have really been fed to us by fossil fuel companies to encourage us, to allow them to keep emitting and to keep polluting. And so with that awareness, I felt like I had to do something, and so I actually founded the Effective Climate Action Project. And as I worked on that organization, I think a few things kind of solidified my personal desire to take action on climate change. And that was the COVID-19 pandemic, and then also the wildfires. And so you can see in the top right-hand corner there, that's a picture of my house. Such a crazy time that I think a lot of us on the West Coast, experienced, that just looking outside your window and realizing how the world has changed, and this is due to our actions as humans on this planet. And so that really solidified in me this desire to take action on climate change. One last thing I want to mention is that during the summer of 2020, I attended a summit with Plan International USA. And they taught us about the SDGs, and they encouraged me to create a project. And so with some of their mentorship and with a seed grant, I was able to kickstart the Effective Climate Action Project. And that's where Claire joined me as one of our first members to play a really key role in the organization. So I'll kick it off to Claire.
Yeah, thank you, Luna. So my climate story is one that I find similar to what a lot of youth in our generation grew up to experience. One based off of not only fear around the effects of climate change we experience in our lifetime, but also the ambition to create a better future for not only us, but for the environment we live in. And I have always been surrounded in a mindful environment around sustainable practices. My parents always taught us to be aware of the little things in our daily routines that may be harmful to the environment, such as paying attention to recycling, avoiding overpackaged products, living towards a minimalistic lifestyle, bringing reusable bags, etc. That was really on an individual level. And I was so lucky enough to live in an environment surrounded by nature, leading me towards a natural love for nature through the constant exposure to it around me. But as I got older and saw all these wildfires, heat waves, and snowstorms get more drastic and hit closer to home, especially during the last year when we had those drastic wildfires in Oregon, California, and Washington, my focus shifted from having just a young heart loving nature to being more aware about it, what systemic change is that can be made, and how I can use my youth voice to support it. adding on to the performance of the usual daily recycling and minimalistic lifestyle in my routine. And I also often felt this guilt about feeling that like nature I always had to enjoy to my benefit. And once I realized that what I enjoyed and what gave me happiness was like at such danger and that had such a big impact on our future, I really started thinking about what I can do to make change. And I feel like as youth in our generation, we really feel the results of climate change throughout our lives. But I feel that as time travels too fast, we don't have enough time to mourn at what's happening in the world. We need to take action. And joining ECAP was a really good opportunity for me to not only spread awareness, but I was also able to learn about how youth like us can make a systemic action towards preventing global warming. Yeah, so these are just like a couple of pictures of me. I guess like that my sustainable practices were just like such a routine that I wasn't really able to catch it on camera, but these are just like some moments in nature that I really cherish. And then this was also the 2019 climate strike in Portland, which were all really important to me. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about what ECAP is. So ECAP is short for the Effective Climate Action Project. And we are a youth-founded and youth-led organization helping to combat the lack of public focus on systemic solutions to climate change. And we do this through youth leadership and interactive climate simulations. And we think that for so long, our focus has been on the climate problem, not on climate solutions. And we believe that by equipping others with the tools to really understand these systemic solutions, which are grounded in science, technology, and policy, we can empower others to advocate for the changes our world needs. And to fulfill our goals and mission as an organization, we have 3 core initiatives. So the first one, as you can see here, is elevating climate-related youth opportunities, organizations, and information. The second one is leading climate simulation events in our community. And the final one is advocating for local environmental legislation and policy through youth leadership programs, the Take Action Tuesday campaigns that we take on our social media every week, social infographics, workshops, and much more. We're super excited about our impact so far. In the 9 months that ECAP has been around, we've run a total of 13 workshops, reached 80 youth participants from 7 different countries, and we've gathered over 200 members whom we connect with on our Instagram page. We also have a community of global climate simulation facilitators, including Luna and I on our team, and we have also been running a training program as well for youth leaders around the world. And on our social media platforms, we've engaged hundreds of members with international informational posts on a variety of environmental topics, such as presidential climate plans, ways to effectively talk about climate change, and global environmental youth movements, and much more. And in order to learn more about how we can effectively advocate for systemic change, we interviewed other change makers, including Oregon Senator Hayward and Representative Dexter, and climate activists from Nepal and the Netherlands. And through our youth climate simulation leader training program, we have trained 2 youth from 2 lead workshops utilizing the En-ROADS and C-ROADS models, which we will talk about a little bit in the future slides, but in their own communities in the US and abroad. And through our workshops, people tell us that they feel more aware and hopeful and motivated to take action. And finally, we've partnered with organizations including Renew Oregon, Plan USA, which Luna talked about in her story slide, and also the Portland Youth Climate Council, which you can see here. We ran a climate simulation with them, so that was really cool. And next, I will kick it off to Luna to talk a little bit about systemic issues.
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about systemic solutions to climate change, but I think it's important that we take a step back to analyze what that really means. So as sustainability consultants and employees, I'm sure you all have a lot of thoughts on that. So I'd love to ask you all, what do you think of when you hear systemic solutions to climate change?
Transportation decarbonization.
policy changes?
Yeah, I'd definitely say it starts from the policymakers and government, definitely leading the way with especially what's happening in Oregon. So.
And also like voting the right people in to make those policy changes.
Yeah, I agree. It's industry level change and just trying to transition away from fossil fuels.
Yes, yeah, these are all great. We recently sent out a survey actually asking about public awareness on systemic solutions to climate change. And these were a lot of the responses that people gave, things like, you know, connecting with policy work and education, and then also like leveraging our power as a consumer. Let's see, revenue neutral carbon tax and all these kind of policy changes that we can be making. So definitely those are exactly what systemic solutions are. So systemic solutions are at the core of what we do as youth activists, harnessing technology and policy, and also at the core of your work as sustainability consultants. So Claire, well, yeah, if we could go to the next slide. All right, so we want to talk a little bit more about why these systemic climate solutions are so incredibly important. Exactly, voting with your dollars. Yeah. So systemic solutions to climate change are incredibly important because they allow us to engage with these high-level social dynamics that address the core roots of this climate issue. So when we think about systemic climate solutions, we're thinking systemically. And so we're considering intersectionality and how climate solutions can help address multiple societal issues, whether that's environmental racism or social inequality, climate or gender inequality, international conflict and intervention, all of these other issues that are, you know, intrinsically tied in with climate change. And so as youth, we are often directed, whether that's in schools, at home, and just in society in general, to these solutions that we see as honestly ineffective because they focus on the individual. And so tree planting, beach cleanups, recycling, we're picking up the literal pieces of the problem instead of tackling those root causes, instead of being taught to engage in policy, advocacy, and research. I know personally that when I was first getting into climate action, these were the things that were suggested to me and that felt reachable. People would tell me, oh, just plant more trees, you know, work in your garden, try to take less showers. And it's all about this sense of guilt and that we have to limit our own personal lifestyle to actually impact climate change. But the reality is that writing to your legislator or organizing a climate march is just as achievable as these other things and much more effective. And so systemic solutions engage us as students in things we don't normally have access to, or these activities that we are told that we can't take part in. And so when we hold a systems approach to business, education, activism work, we're not just learning about climate change in the environmental sense, but also these social and economic senses and finding the intersections between many different issues. And so the models we use in our workshops, Claire's going to talk about this soon, but those are another example of how we engage in systemic action. And this is why we find them so important and so impactful. And so, yeah, I'll kick it back to Claire to explain a little bit more about how these computer models work and how you all might be able to utilize them in your own work.
Yeah, thank you, Luna. I will have my camera off for a while because my internet is kind of unstable, so I hope you guys don't mind. But yeah, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the models that we use and what exactly our organizational approach is. So our organizational approach works with these systems to create change, and we specifically tap into policy and education as ways to make an impact. And our climate simulation and workshops are an example of this. And we want to share them with you because we think that you can utilize them in your own workplace, possibly, or we think that they can help make informed policy or executive decisions with companies. Talking a little bit more about what the climate simulation workshops are, they are centered around two computer models called En-ROADS and C-ROADS, designed by the MIT Sloan School of Management and the think tank Climate Interactive. And you may have heard of these, but Climate Interactive is a think tank where they generate these En-ROADs and C-ROADs and many other computer models that actual scientists and decision makers worldwide use. Here we will be focusing more on the En-ROADs model, which harnesses global data sets and the latest climate science to analyze how different climate policies and measures impact our current trajectory on global warming. And this can be from anything from renewable energy, as you can see on this visual right here, to afforestation or a carbon price and many other categories that impact climate change. So En-ROADs is a tool with a space for imagination and hope, and can help with informed policy and executive decisions within companies. And as facilitators, Luna and I use this model to visually and intuitively show workshop participants how their own ideas on climate change solutions would affect Earth's climate system. And we think that there's often a mistrust of science, saying it's too complex, doesn't relate to our lives, isn't engaging enough, and many other opinions. But what we found about ECAP is that when people have the chance to personally experience the science in a fun and interactive way, it becomes more clear not only why we need to care about the issue, but how science is going to help us make lasting change. Now I'll kick it off to Luna to lead a mini En-ROADs workshop with you all to kind of show what our usual routine is with the participants. So Luna, you're up.
Yeah, okay. Presenting here. Can you all see my screen? All right. So yeah, as part of our presentation, we wanted to give you kind of a rundown of how our workshops actually work. This is one of kind of the 3 main workshops that we run, and it's called the En-ROADs Climate Workshop. Here in front of you is the En-ROADs model, and as we mentioned, it's designed by Climate Interactive and MIT Sloan, and it uses the best available science. It's constantly being referred to, new climate information and new data that's coming out to form this model that I think does a really amazing task. It lets us test different solutions to climate change using these levers below here. Adjusting them, increasing or decreasing different values to then see how we can impact global temperature increase, the expected global temperature increase globally by the end of the century. So I'm going to run you guys through kind of a quick example, teach you about what you're seeing here on the model, and then hopefully we can get kind of maybe 1 or 2 ideas, suggestions that we want to test on this model, and I can show you how we would normally explain them to participants. Yeah, so this is En-ROADs model. On the left here, up here, we have global sources of primary energy. And so this basically represents all of our current primary sources that we use for the energy we use as humans. Things like coal, oil, gas, renewables, some bioenergy, a little bit of nuclear, and then new zero you see here, that represents the idea of, well, what if we invent a new kind of electricity source in the future? And so what Climate Interactive and MIT has done, which I think is really amazing, is that they've broken it down, focusing on these systemic and core solutions to climate change into these different sections. So we have our energy supply, all the energy we're using. We have transportation, and then we have buildings and industry. We have growth as humans, so economic growth, population growth. And then also we have land and industry emissions. So focusing not only on carbon dioxide, but other greenhouse gases like methane, hydrofluorocarbons, things like that. And then we also have the removal side of things. So afforestation, naturally through the planting of trees to increase those carbon sinks. And then also the technological side. So things like carbon capture and storage, etc. And then here on the right, we have our expected temperature increase. This model is basically, yeah, we're focusing towards 3.6 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. But, as the Paris Agreement and other agreements have focused, we want to try to achieve 2 degrees Celsius or 1.5 at best. And so we often explain a lot more about the background behind the Paris Agreement, but as you are all familiar with that, that's kind of the goal we hold in our simulations. And of course, we might be updating that depending on what things happen at COP26 this year, new climate accords and new decisions being made, which is exciting. So with all of this, I know I've been rambling on for a lot, but are there any, well, actually, here's the thing. Okay, with an audience, when we have an audience, we ask them this question. Given our current scenario, we're headed towards 3.6 degrees Celsius temperature increase by the end of the century. Given this current scenario, what do you think can help us achieve limiting temperature increase to hopefully 2 degrees Celsius or lower to help create a better world? So what solutions are things that you want to test? And I encourage you not just to pick one of these levers below here, but to really think about what interests you, because as facilitators in our workshops, we connect that to the lever. Yeah, so are there any things we want to test on this model? Electrification, okay. Yeah, we can start there. So electrification, that's a pretty big bubble, umbrella term. We have several approaches. Do you want to focus specifically on transportation or things like building and industry? Any preference? Anyone can share. Buildings and industry, all right. Yeah, I'm sure, we'll see. Okay. Oh. Hold on. Transport, yeah. Okay, lots of ideas. We'll try to tackle these guys. If we don't have time, we can always try to run a separate En-ROADS workshop with you all. But let's start with maybe we can compare transport and buildings and industry electrification. All right, so focusing, I can't see the chat here. Yeah, let's do carbon price, definitely. Okay. So focusing on buildings and industry, that's things like using electric motors to help reduce emissions, improving air quality. And so we're kind of replacing the current things we're using in our systems to be more, to save more electricity. And so, yeah, they say through in buildings, appliances, heating systems, that's a big one, and other machines. All right, so looking at our graph here, this shows us basically our current scenario. And so that's basically, yeah, how our electrification is planned to go throughout the end of the century. And it's planning to increase in electrification as we kind of, yeah, replace things. And so I think that's ties into kind of electricity efficiency. But all right, so with this, what are you envisioning? And anyone can speak to this. How ambitiously do you want to increase our electrification, assuming we want to increase it? By what % per year? Any thoughts?
Suppose close to 100%.
Yeah.
Be less heating, so 75, 80.
Okay, that sounds good. Maybe let's go to 80% per year. And sometimes I like to look, and I encourage you all to look at this model later because there's so much to dig into here. But with all these buttons, they give you more information in depth about each of these solutions. So you can see highly incentivized, looks like the highest doesn't go, only goes to about 5% per year because this is kind of working incrementally. So maybe if we want to go as ambitiously as would be feasible, do we want to aim for 5%? Okay. I'm going to enter this in here, and I encourage you all to look at the graphs above and see how things change. Okay, so we have just increased our electrification of specifically buildings and industry. You can see that highly incentivized blue line here, and that's brought our temperature down to 0.2 degrees Celsius, which is pretty big. This is my favorite part of using the model, seeing how things change when you implement things. All right, okay, we have a few thoughts. We have renewables, carbon price. Do you want to add on to this plan that we're doing? Anyone has a vote? What do you want to do first? Renewables, carbon price.
Just play with it.
All right, let's do it. So renewables, let's start with renewables here. We can see that things have already changed based on our past change, which is to encourage, to incentivize electrification, which makes sense because as we increase electrification, we're also going to be turning to things like renewables. So that's already increasing, shifting from our baseline scenario. I'm guessing we want to subsidize renewables, not tax them. Do you have any thoughts on how ambitiously? You can look here at the graph. Okay. Let's just go all the way here. I feel like we need to test lots of things. So incentivizing renewables as much as would be feasible has brought us down another 0.2 degrees Celsius. And we see our renewables here in our energy sources shifting up significantly. And in doing so, they're displacing specifically coal, oil, and gas, which is what we want, right? We don't want, the key is not to just increase our renewable use. It's only going to make an impact on the climate if we're actually displacing coal, oil, and gas, which are, the sources that are fueling this climate issue. Do we want to go to a carbon price to further push down those fossil fuels? This one I want to go more in depth because I think it can be really, I don't know, nitpicky, and the impact depends on what we choose. So looking at this graph here, we can see we're currently at no carbon price. And this is all these policies are assuming we're implementing it at a global scale. So given that, do you want to, kind of what range are we thinking of implementing this at? Anyone can chime in. And this is dollars per ton of CO2. Very high. Yes, let's do it. Okay, I'm gonna slide this all the way then. Sliding this up, and we see, you guessed it, guys, carbon price is the big one here. I want to look at that again because a lot of things changed. And if anyone has any kind of observations on our graph here, please speak up. It's brought us from 3.2 to 2.5. A carbon price is, and what we found here, it pushes coal. So coal is one of the most impacted by a carbon price, probably because it has the highest concentration of kind of CO2 equivalent, and it's also one of kind of the biggest, well, it's impacted the most. And so, it also is very immediate. So we are looking here at our timeline. It starts changing our from the status quo, the baseline scenario, or business as usual, like immediately. It has that big impact. And while I think a lot of these energy supply changes take time because we have to start, recreating that infrastructure and things are still being rebuilt and changed, a carbon price has the impact because it's focusing on decentivizing, these sources. And as we know, money plays an incredibly important role in our lives as humans. So I always enjoy seeing how much a carbon price, if we were actually to be able to achieve that, which can be difficult with politics and things like that, but to see how much of an impact it would have. Maybe let's try one more thing here, and then I'll put this in the chat for all of you to fiddle with it more. Any thoughts? I know we had some thoughts about, let's see here. Yeah, coal is definitely hard hit, and we can talk about that more if we have more time. Let's see here. All right, I wanted to mention one more thing, that when we compare electrification for transport and versus buildings and industry, you'll see that buildings and industry have a much greater impact, which is interesting because we often think about, driving Teslas, renewable, or electric cars as such a key part of climate change, and it still brings us down maybe 0.1 degrees Celsius, but compared to all the energy we're using in our buildings, whether that's, in homes or actual industries, that makes a big impact. And so definitely important. I think that ties into your work as well. All right, there's a whole world of solutions we can investigate here, and hopefully this gives you a small insight into what we normally do. But I encourage you all to press on these 3 dots in the corner. It shows you the graph, and then it also gives you kind of examples of how this could concretely be implemented into workplaces or wherever that is. And then also some big messages. So for example, transport electrification. If the world is dependent on coal and natural gas for electric power, the net effect of electrification is only a slight change. Switching to electric modes of transport makes the biggest impact for the climate when electrical energy sources are low carbon. Because, you know, if you think about it, it's not going to help if we're electrifying more if the electricity we're using is coal, oil, and gas. Yeah, exactly. Taylor's making that exact point. All right, sorry to rush that, but we don't have a lot of time and I want to give time for questions as well. So I'm going to stop presenting and get back to Claire. But let me put this scenario in the chat here for all of you to fiddle with it later. And this is a free tool for anyone, so definitely feel free to pull it up in your workplace during a meeting on your own time, whenever you want to work with it. And also for those of you who are, you know, really invested in kind of the scientific side of things, I encourage you to, if you're looking at the model, go to simulation in the corner and then click assumptions, and it actually shows you all of the assumptions that were made in the creation of this model. And so whether that's climate sensitivity, and it gives you the option to slide to adjust those levers. So it's really transparent, I think, and then it allows you, maybe if you read an article recently about how climate sensitivity is X amount and you think, oh, I don't know if I agree with what the model's saying here, you can change it yourself to see what the impact would be and how that would change different things. So hopefully that allows you all to have a greater sense of agency when using this model.
Yeah, thank you so much, Luna, for that mini workshop. I know for me personally that after I first attended one of these workshops, it was really surprising and interesting to see how our proposed solutions we can directly see how that impacts. So we really encourage you to kind of play around with that model afterwards and even possibly implement it into your workplace. But now moving on, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what the other type of event that we run with the C-ROADS model. So this is called the World Climate Simulation, and it's another type of event that we ran with many different groups around the world. And it uses the computer model called C-ROADS, as I mentioned. Again, the World Climate Simulation is an interactive workshop developed by the think tank Climate Interactive and the MIT Sloan Sustainability Foundation. And how this game works briefly is that it is a Model UN style event where participants step into the role of negotiators at the Conference of Parties, and they work as a team representing different nations and negotiate with other teams to create proposals which act as proposals of climate policy. The overall goal is to reduce greenhouse gas levels to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. And the computer model C-ROADS is utilized then to test the proposals that the teams form to see the impact that these proposals will have on global warming. And this is kind of like a similar procedure as the En-ROADS workshop. And just to talk a little bit more about my personal experience, when I first attended this workshop, it really opened my eyes towards what taking systemic action on climate change really means. But I was honestly intimidated to host these events for diverse groups of audiences. But what I felt was that running these simulations really helped me grow, because this is not just only a one-sided event. I'm sure that many of you have attended those meetings where the speaker just goes on and talks at it's not as engaging, but this is really an experience where participants can engage in a conversation that shows how their proposed solutions can impact the climate change positively. And for me, it is the most rewarding feeling when youth walk away with the hope and ambition for stopping climate change that they didn't have as strongly before. So I'm going to kick it off to Luna to talk a little bit more about our goals for the future.
Yeah, and introducing you all to our organization, we wanted to let you know about kind of what we're hoping to accomplish in the future. So we've currently run around 15 climate simulations, and by the end of the year, we hope to run at least 20 climate simulation workshops in our community and around the world. We're also hoping to implement these educational experiences into different school curriculums. So we're currently focusing on the Portland Public Schools climate justice curriculum and working with teachers to hopefully implement some of these workshops into their own classrooms to impact their students. We also hope to grow our organizational members to 300 and also to pass ambitious climate policy locally and inspire youth leaders to take action on climate change globally. We have a few upcoming projects, including a campaign, which will be focused on sparking youth interest in international climate agreements leading up to this year's COP26 in November, as well as working to diversify our board and expand our youth training program. Just to speak a little bit more about that, it's called the Youth Climate Simulation Leader Peer Training Program. We've run 2 youth from the Netherlands through it already, and basically we teach them how to run the workshops that we run with ECAP in their own communities. We're also honored to have recently won a few awards, including the Ashoka STEM for Changemaking Challenge, T-Mobile Changemakers Challenge, and Project Green Schools Green Difference Award. And so with these recognitions and this funding, we hope to continue to expand our impact. As for our timeline, our project will last through August 2022 until our current leadership board graduates, but we're hoping to continue our organizational work through a new cohort of motivated student leaders when we graduate, hopefully establishing some sort of kind of mentorship program so we can kind of help them take the organization in a way that they envision to continue making an impact. All right, so now that you know more about our organization and our work individually, we want to shift to talk about what we hope you will take away from this presentation and some changes that we hope to see you make in the future, specifically in the workplace. Yeah, so in watching this presentation, we hope that you can respect our youth voices, but that you don't stop at praise. So I think a lot of adults will see youth-led climate movements and activism and kind of use it to justify their inaction. They'll be like, wow, these kids, they have it all under control. So inspiring, keep doing what you're doing, you know? But the reality is, while we're doing everything we can with our passion and our motivation, we're still reliant on the people in power and the people who, you know, I've already had the time to grow up and become adults and work in workplaces like all of you. And so we need you as adults to work with us, just as you need us to work with you, because we will be the future workforce. And so we hope that you can hold an understanding and an empathy for the unique burden we feel as youth. Like, this is no small thing. It impacts us every day. It's what we're constantly thinking about. And we hope that you also work to elevate youth voices and to work with us and help us as youth access opportunities to tap into these systemic solutions. As consultants, I think many of you have the ability to tap into clients and to employees and to encourage them to include sustainability and youth in your work and leadership. And so I think there's a lot of programs out there for college students and above, but we also ask that you possibly consider opportunities for high school students because we're more mature than you think, and I think we possess great passion, and so giving us these opportunities as soon as possible will definitely help us take action on the climate. How do you recommend younger youth? Okay, we'll answer that later. Claire, you want to move on to the next slide?
Yeah, I might cut out a little bit again but I guess the main question here is, how can businesses uplift youth leaders? So what you are doing today with us is a great example, just letting us share our voices as youth and giving us the opportunity to learn as well. But this is just a list that we came up with about how you can uplift youth leaders with things such as hosting internships or job shadow opportunities for youth high school ages and above, having mentorship for youth interested in climate careers, having a youth advisory council, and hosting presentations on sustainable careers for students. And Luna and I were actually talking about this before, but as youth, we often really are passionate and want to engage in these sorts of opportunities, but it's often not really, it's kind of invisible. It's not really given to us. And if we have more opportunities like this that are kind of shown to our view, then we think that we will definitely have the power to take more, not only learn, but also know how to take systemic action. So does anyone have any other ideas on ways and opportunities that this can be applied to workplaces? We'd love to add this short list that we have for future presentations. So if anyone has any ideas on how youth and businesses can work together, if you can share in the chat, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I think we can head on to the last slides.
Yeah, definitely. So the final thing we want to do with you is Do you have any questions or suggestions, opinions about our presentations, suggestions about the work that we do, or any additional ideas that you guys have? We would love to add to the presentation that we have and also increase our knowledge. And we're also open to criticism, so anything is welcome.
And also, I think I'm trying to look through the chat here, but a few of the questions might have gotten buried. So if you want to kind of reiterate those, that would also be really great. I see one question that I can start thinking about while everyone else or start talking about while everyone else thinks on their questions. So Hattie said, how do you recommend younger youth, elementary or middle school age, to get engaged in climate activism or in climate action? Great question. So I think Claire and I talked about this a little bit, but well, so it's a balance, right? Because you want them to focus as youth on like these really key solutions for climate change, but also how do you get started, right? That's the question. And so for me, I think what's really important, it's like finding your passion. And so by doing that, finding like what matters to you. And everyone has that different aspect that brings them to climate change, whether that's appreciating nature or just finding out about the inequalities that we have as youth. But I think a great way to start engaging young youth is giving them the information on climate change, but then also having them start out with those simple activities. So, I mean, tree planting is, maybe it's not effective, but it can teach people ways in which they can actually make an impact like individually. And so if you start out with those small ideas and then start shifting them to things like policy work and organizational work, I think that's definitely impactful. Another thing is helping youth understand how can they merge their own personal interests, their own personal identity, their own personal abilities or skills to actually then help climate change, because climate change can be really daunting because there's so many ways to approach it. And so I think if you make youth understand that like each of us has our own personal way that we can contribute to to taking action. So whether that's like you are passionate about art or music, graphic design, leadership, communication, the scientific side of things, or the public speaking side of things. Like there's so many ways that people can get involved. And so if youth realize like, oh, I can connect my personal passion to this global issue and actually make a difference. Like I think that's what we need, because around the world to address this issue, we need everyone focusing on their niche interests to actually tackle it. Yeah, looking through these. Are you going to have a branch in Washington as well? I mean, that's definitely an ambition. Like we hope to branch out to larger spaces. While we are focused in Portland, Oregon, we have a lot of connections like just around the country. And so, and we've been doing a lot of our meetings online. And so I think we do hope to kind of establish other groups in other parts of the world. So Washington would definitely be a great place to get that started. Yeah. How much is climate change covered in schools these days? Oh, good question. Let me try to see if I can find, give me a second here. Claire, do you want to talk about a few of the other questions? Because I'm going to pull something up.
Well, yeah, I can kind of talk about my own personal experience of climate change coverage in schools. Oftentimes there's very scarce teaching about climate change, unless it's like a class that's focused on the climate or focused on the environment. It's often, just as we talked about before, focused on the problem of climate change, not really what we can do as youth to kind of perform activism on it. And that's kind of connecting to the question that we had before about what can youth do and what can businesses and people empowered do for youth to kind of get involved in this problem. And it's definitely the exposure and the tools and resources that can be given to youth. I think that's definitely a big thing, because to kind of like give us the path towards taking systemic action. So Luna, do you have that up?
Yeah, so I actually wanted to share with you all, we recently did a global survey for youth and adults, kind of to learn more about the opinions or the beliefs people hold on climate change, as well as kind of how much people are currently taking action, their awareness of the issue, etc. And so I want to kind of present this, if you can all see it. Claire, do you mind if I
Oh,
open
yeah.
your eye, you're presenting. Thanks. All right. Can you all see this? This is kind of a zoom in on a few of the graphics we were able to collect from as a result of our data and our survey, but I think this is really interesting to share. So the question is the climate change curriculum offered at your school, and are you satisfied with it? So most people do have some sort of climate change curriculum. They do learn about it in school. I think that was 80% higher. But with that, only like a large percent, over 80% of youth are somewhat or not at all satisfied with their current curriculum. And the common causes we found for that was that, you know, it's not covered enough. They only teach us about the problem. It's focused on fear, not hope. You know, it's not anything about empowerment or actually about how we can tie into this global issue. And so I think that's just really telling to show that like we have a lot of work to make, especially in education. To teach youth like this impacts other issues. This isn't just, you know, an environmental issue. And like I mentioned before, there's so many ways to approach it. And we're going to be writing an article actually on the results of this survey. So if you want to look at these data visualizations more in depth later, that'll be on our website probably in the next few weeks as an article. So hopefully, yeah, and you're one of the first groups we're sharing that information with. So let's see, any other questions? We only have a little bit of time left, or are we already over?
I think we're at time, but yeah,
Okay.
if anyone had another question.
Let's see, I think this might be good for now then. We can move on to the last slide, and then if there are any other questions, absolutely send us a message. You can email me, I'll put my email in the chat, as well as our organization's email will be up on the next slide. You can also send us a message over Instagram. Yeah, thank you all so much.
Yeah, these are just the handles for our website here and our email and our Instagram. And I think Luna's putting those in the chat. So yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. Hey, Luna, do you want to add anything?
Let's see here. I don't have the direct links. Okay, yeah, the Instagram one right now. But yeah, we encourage all of you to stay in touch with our work, and hopefully we can kind of work with the relationship we've built to, you know, make more opportunities. If you ever want to partner in any way, we're totally open to that as well. You can also follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn. I'll put my LinkedIn in the chat here. And just thank you again all so much. We really appreciate for the opportunity. This is exactly like the kind of things that we hope more businesses are doing. And so like clearly you all know what we are asking for, and hopefully we can work on that in the future. So that's my LinkedIn there. Thank you again so much for this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone.
ECAP, that was amazing.
Thank you.